It is October 10th, 2013. My name is David Quick. I'm here with Chekesha Rashad. I'm interviewing her for the DC Gardeners Oral History Project, which is a project of the Neighborhood Farm Initiative and the DC Humanities Council. Chekesha, thank you for sitting and talking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Could I have you start by saying your name and your address?
Sure. My name is Chekesha Rashad. Do you want me to spell it? Okay. My address is 1351 Maple View Place, Southeast, Washington, D.C., 20020.
Thank you. So this interview will mainly be about gardening, but let's start by talking a bit about your early life, where you grew up, your family, neighborhood, things like that.
Sure. Well, I am fifth generation Washingtonian. My whole family's lived here in D.C., and I grew up in Northwest. Actually, my mother and I were both born at Walter Reed. We were both Army brats. We lived in Northwest near, some people may remember Posins that used to exist. Grew up right there on right off Colorado Avenue and Georgia Avenue.
What was Posins?
Posin was a Jewish deli.
Okay.
Which any true Washingtonian of a certain age would remember. It was the most amazing deli. And the bakery with the gingerbread and the tea cookies and everything was so delicious. But the father passed on and the son didn't want to continue the business. And I was away at college when that happened and came back and was devastated. But in about 81, we moved down to the waterfront in Southwest. And so from 81 on, my family, my mom has been there. And so, just grew up in high-rise condo, not really a gardening area, but just having access to the parks and the waterfront was kind of cool growing up, because that wasn't like a lot of other DC kids experience.
Yeah, Southwest is
it's like a hidden jewel.
The little hidden quadrant.
Well, not anymore. The secret is out. The secret is out now.
Yeah, so you were, how old were you when you moved to Southwest?
About 8 years old. I grew up Islamic. So in terms of the house, we really didn't have like a lot of processed foods. Not that my mother cooked really, because my parents were divorced early, and my mom, both my parents met at Howard, and she went back to school. My dad was in the military. We moved overseas for a bit. She came back, finished school, went on to finish her master's, and went on to finish her doctorate. So I kind of grew up with her, going to class with her, and seeing work and whatnot. So.
Did you have siblings?
No, I'm my mother's only child.
Okay. And what was your mom's field that she went and got her degree in?
My mom has, I believe, her BA's in Afro-American Studies in English. I cannot remember what her master's is in, but her doctorate is in organizational communication. And she's a federal government employee, actually the director of training and development for the Office of Personnel Management.
Okay. Wow.
Kind of see it progress from a GS2 to a GS15 step 10. It's kind of interesting process.
Yeah, no kidding. So what was Southwest like? You grew up there through high school?
Yes, I went to Wilson. Oddly enough, Wilson was our neighborhood school all the way down in Southwest back then. It was interesting because in my complex, I kind of grew up in a affluent block, and so there were no other children in my complex but one other child. And so I was always really around adults, except for at school. So I think my background is a little different. I don't remember going to a bunch of kids' parties or anything. I was always around adult things, which I think for me it was great because I learned so much early on about other cultures and other adult type interests that it stayed with me my entire life. So I appreciate, being around that. It really helped me to become a very cultured person very, very early.
Did you go to Deal for middle school?
No, I started in Brightwood. Well, I went to the Owl School, which was a Muslim school. Then I went to Brightwood. Then I did go to Jefferson for 1 year. But then I went to a Christian school for 1 year. My mom had to have some kind of a serious surgery, and she sent me to live with a relative, and for that year while she was recovering. And then I came back after that year and then went to All Saints Catholic school for 1 year, and then Wilson.
Okay.
So I kind of like.
So you saw it all.
Right. I've been so many different schools, so many different religions. So and then we at one point we ended up in high school. We started going to a Unitarian church. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of like from Islam. Yeah, absolutely. All Souls. Yes, okay. Yes. I can't think of his name right now. The pastor that passed away, but his sister was my English teacher. Okay. Easton. Uh-huh. David, I want to say, was it David?
The one who was there for a long time.
Yes, African American guy, mm-hmm. older. Yes, mm-hmm. His sister was my English teacher at Wilson.
Okay.
So it was very. It was a great. Wilson was a great school back mm-hmm. then. I loved it, and going to All Souls was different because you have so many different people there from different backgrounds. I just thinking now as I'm discussing with you, it's so interesting. My life in terms of what I was around mm-hmm. and, all the different cultures and different types of people.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate that.
And your family has been here in DC for a long time?
Yes. On my father's side, I'm fifth generation. On my mother's, I'm second. Uh-huh. From what I understand about my father's side of the family is that his father was one of the first African American / Native American firefighters over in Georgetown. Mm. And I do recall, in DC, we have to take DC history. I do recall seeing my grandfather's names in parts of the book. So, but it's been obviously 1,000 years since I've taken that class. But I do remember that growing up, like, oh, okay, that is true.
Yeah.
So it's just I've never delved or done any research into it.
Do you know anything else about, were they in one particular part of the city or one kind of work that they did?
They were all just in the city.
Mm-hmm.
When I got reconnected with them, they were in Northeast over there by Spingarn.
Okay.
But my father's like one of 9. His mother was like one of 11. His father was one of 13. Mm-hmm. So like on that side, there's like a huge number of people. I don't know, obviously a lot of them, but they came from a very, very big family on that side.
Yeah. Nice. And did you growing up, so as you were growing up and coming into high school, what were you thinking about for the rest of your life?
Well, I actually always kind of thought I love sports, and but I also love food. Mm-hmm. And I grew up with my mom because when my parents got divorced young, it was really just me and her. Later on in life, my father and that side of the family reappeared. Mm-hmm. But for a long time, it was just me and my mother. Mm-hmm. And we would sit and watch cooking shows on PBS, mm-hmm. Because cable wasn't cable like it is now. So we would watch like Julia Child, Yan Can Cook, Justin Wilson, Jacques Pepin, mm-hmm. All those. It was funny. We were talking. We recently were in Hawaii, in August, and we just spent a good amount of the time just sitting in the bed together watching TV, which is like I had a flashback to my childhood of us doing that. And Bob Ross, a happy little tree. That guy, like that is like. That was like some of the best times because that's why I learned and got the love for food, and then also being around all these different cultures.
Yeah.
My palate developed very, very early. Mm. And so, I am a true foodie, a food snob, mm-hmm. Love food, think it's amazing.
Yeah. What do you remember eating, just having lived here your whole life, what kind of food?
Well, I really grew up kind of vegetarian.
Okay.
So I really didn't eat meat, really anything. As I was kind of going to high school, started to have like fish and stuff. But in high school, everybody went to the carry out, that kind of thing. But I, growing up, did not eat that kind of stuff for the most part. Only when I got to college did I really like full-fledged jump out there. I went to college in Louisiana.
Okay.
So like another great food place, and my doctors, it's funny because my doctors tried to explain to like the school cafeteria people, like so I could kind of get a special diet, that I didn't eat meat and pork and stuff, and they were like, well, we have vegetables, and my doctors were like, but you have pork in the vegetables. They're like, can't she just pick it out? So I went to school in a very rural area in Louisiana, and I didn't drive. So it was either you're going to eat this food or you're going to die. And so that's when I had bacon, like, for the first time. And, bacon is like a transitional thing. Once you have that, it kind of is all downhill from there. And so, living in Louisiana, gumbo, etouffee, boudin, just everything good in the world, you can have.
What school was it?
I went to Grambling.
What's it called?
Grambling in North Louisiana. It's mostly known for our band. And we have the legendary coach Eddie Robinson, who is the winningest coach in collegiate football history.
Oh, wow.
So he had been at the same school 57 years, married to the same woman, sent hundreds of players to the league from, it was a feeder back then for African-American athletes to get into the league. So really a legendary guy. He was still there when I was in college, so I had an opportunity to work with him. But it was a great... I had never had that type of food. Again, had never really been outside of D.C. Up until I went to college. So it was really a great experience. A really great experience.
Before you went to college, while you were still in D.C., do you remember being aware? Because you had not started gardening yet.
No, it wasn't even thought in my mind.
Yeah, do you have any memories of being aware of gardening as an activity?
I didn't know if it was necessarily garden, but I heard family history of my mother's grandfather had farmland in Montgomery County, and she remembers. She would tell me she remembers, going to visit them, on the farm. Her father was from Cuthbert, Georgia, and my grandmother was from Maryland. And so she was a farm girl. So I've heard stories about farming, like the farm, but I never visited a farm, had no experience with it at all.
And didn't know anybody here in D.C.
No, I lived in a high-rise, so, not really. My mom had houseplants. Like, that's as close as it got. But, no garden.
So in terms of your family had some roots in agriculture that didn't sound like you knew a whole lot about.
No, just my mom's recollection of her experience when she was young.
What was her point of view towards that part of the family history?
Oh, well, looking from, where she is now, going back to her experience as a little girl, she just really talked about how our people were always like business entrepreneurs. Like my grandfather supplied stuff for like a general store. Yeah. So he raised stuff and then it would go be sold in like the general store. And like her great aunt made clothes, that people would buy and whatnot. So that's really as much as she really had to say, because she was very, very young. And but she did remember, the eating and, her grandfather killing hogs and stuff. And that would be dinner. Yeah.
And while you talked about being exposed to a lot of different cultures. Were you, if you're a vegetarian, it can be hard to do this, but were you?
Not really in D.C. Okay. D.C. you can eat vegetarian very well.
Yeah.
I'm
a vegetarian. I agree.
Yeah, Indian food, Ethiopian food, Asian food. You really can. It's not difficult.
And were
here.
You, even as a kid, were you?
Oh yeah, my mom, when she was a teenager, used to babysit for, I believe, an Indian ambassador. So she loves Indian culture. Like my mom probably has about 35 saris. Like she loves Indian culture, and she just brought that over to me. Yeah. So now I've probably eaten curry all my life in some shape or form, but it's not difficult. Yeah. To be vegetarian at all here.
Was your mom a vegetarian also?
No. Okay. No. Yeah. Well, when we were Muslim, yes.
Okay.
Muslim, yes.
Okay. So you went down to Louisiana and ate bacon, and the rest was history.
It was a wrap. Lamb, bacon, duck, gator, crabs, shrimp, everything. Anything.
Yeah.
like a human garbage can, I guess, for a minute, like just trying everything. Because I never even had Kool-Aid, honestly, till I went to college. And I always used to have to get people to make it for me, because maybe if I read the pack, I would know. But I thought that I thought one pack was good for a gallon. So whenever I would make it, it would be very, very watery, but I didn't read the pack. It was like one pack was for 2 quarts.
Right.
So everyone would like have to make it for me, because it was always like, I was like, why is it not dark? Like, it's never dark when I make it.
Yeah.
So I never had top ramen, oodles and noodles, like none of that. Kraft macaroni cheese out the box, like nothing like that till I was in college.
Yeah. And what did you study when you were in college?
Well, I originally was originally, like I said, I love food. I originally wanted, sports and food were my passion. So at one point I wanted to be a chef, but then I realized I don't want to cook every day because I have to. So I went with my other love, which was sports. And so at the time I thought there was only 3 career paths in sports. Either you're a coach, athlete, or an agent. And so I was originally an accounting major because I wanted to be an agent. But then after tax accounting, I was like, no.
Were you an athlete also?
Yes. I ran track, and threw shot put and discus.
Cool.
But after tax accounting, I started to do some thinking, like, what could get me where I wanted to be. And so I realized, I'm good with people. I'm good with talking. Maybe I'll go to public relations. So that's what I switched my undergrad major to, PR.
Okay. And did you have any other exposure to food, kind of food growing or food production while you were there?
On Grambling's campus, they actually had a catfish farm.
Okay.
So they actually, so I have had more catfish in my life probably than most people, which is really why I don't eat it now, because that's all they fed us in college.
But they had the farm for the dining hall for students, or?
No, they're just on campus. There was a catfish farm by the stadium. So whenever you go to the stadium, you'll see it. And so they had like this open water thing, and then they were just growing catfish in there.
Okay.
And then we would always have catfish in the cafeteria.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. That was the farm. They were farming it for.
I'm making the assumption.
Okay.
We never really knew, but we just knew that they grew catfish, and we always had catfish in the cafeteria. Okay. So that's the correlation. We never saw where there were signs, where it was being sold, or we never saw like a farmer's market kind of thing set up. It was just like a pit catfish, and they were just doing it right there.
And did you end up learning about like catfish production?
No, I mean, not really. It was just very strange. Like right by our stadium, there's this pond that's in the shape of a rectangle that just catfish were in it.
Because catfish are pretty easy to grow.
I guess so. I mean, well, plus Louisiana is mostly swamp, so that they thrive in that kind of environment. But most HBCUs, my school was a historically black college, so most of them started as agricultural type universities. So it's just that by the early 90s, we were a little bit removed from that.
Was there any of that left in terms of what people were studying? Okay. So were you thinking you would come back to DC?
Never. never wanted to come back here because my whole family was here. And so, I listened in college, I would hear about people who would travel down south to go visit their family, and I would like catch the subway, to visit mine. Everyone was here, so I was always the one to be different. Like my whole family works for the government, I'm the only one that doesn't. I was always the one that you wanted to be like the renegade or the rogue to, do something completely different than everyone else. So, being down there was so interesting because at that time, a large part of our student body was from California and Chicago and Florida and New York and Texas. So I was kind of like in this group of African Americans from all over the U.S. and it was really interesting, the different perspectives, especially the people from California, because that's when the gang, in the late 80s, early 90s, when the gangs really were very, very bad out there. So seeing these people come to school to like flee that. It was just really, really interesting. And same thing with Chicago, they had gangs too, but it was so different than my background. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah. Were most of your fellow students it's Grambling.
Grambling.
Yeah, Grambling. Were they from urban environments also? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Obviously a large part of the population comes from the state of Louisiana itself.
Yeah.
But the majority of the out-of-state students were from those 5 places that I listed. So there was only about 10 of us from D.C. Down there. So we had a very tight-knit group because, we thought these kids were so country and backwards. And, it was like, where do they, what is making groceries? Who says that? And just trying to understand the lingo.
For going to buy food?
Right. Grocery shopping is called making groceries. In Louisiana. And it's like, you're not making anything. You might make something from what you buy, but you're not making groceries. So just learning the lingo and the culture, it was kind of an eye-opener because my first class, I remember, teacher walked in the room and I looked, because my whole family went to Howard, and I looked and I said, how is it I come all the way to Louisiana and I have a white professor as my first teacher at an all-black university? And then she opened her mouth and I sat up and I looked and I was like, I read about you people. And I didn't even realize I was saying it out loud. She looked, and she was from Louisiana. She was Creole, but she could pass for being white until she opened her mouth. Like, you would, blue eyes, everything, you would never know that she wasn't white until she started talking. And it was just like, wow, like, growing up listening to stories and reading history, you're like, this really did exist and happens, almost like the Proctor and Newman families up here in our area. So it was like a mind-blowing kind of
Were most of the faculty black though?
Yes. Most of them were.
What is Grambling in a squarely?
It's in a city called Grambling, like literally in the middle of nowhere. It's like the woods opened up, the schools dropped in,
so
sealed
it's
up. Oh, it's very rural.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's very rural.
So for all those kids who were coming from cities across the
country. We were completely. Yeah. We had to drive like 6 miles away really to go to a store. There really was nothing.
Yeah.
And Walmart, that's when I first found Walmart, and it was open 24 hours. So we would just like hang out at Walmart all the time because there was nothing, there was no mall. The nearest mall was like 40 miles away.
Yeah.
And all the fast food places were in the next town. So no, it was really, we had nothing.
Was that did that tend to be stressful for folks?
For me, I actually, after 3 semesters, I actually left.
Okay.
Because I was like, I could not take. In D.C., you can go anywhere. You don't have to drive. You could, and to be in a place where you really had nothing to do.
Yeah.
I used to take 22 hours a semester just because I had nothing else to do. And so after 3 semesters, and not being kind of happy down there, my mom tricked me to coming home by saying, "Oh, come home, I'll buy you a car." And then, I came home, and then she said, "Well, I shouldn't have bribed you with something that you wanted." I'm like, "That's the purpose of a bribe. Get me to do something." I ended up going to Howard for about 2 weeks, and I say 2 weeks because, oddly enough, Grambling came up to play Morgan State in football. And I went to the game, and I saw Coach Rob, and I saw a number of my friends, and they were like, "Why are you here? Why aren't you back in school?" And I left thinking, why am I home?
Yeah.
And so I came home from the game and was like, "Mom, I'm not going to go back to Howard." And she thought I meant in the spring, and I was like, "No, Monday." And I withdrew and went back to Grambling.
Oh, wow.
And finished back. It was in my blood. It was home. It's where I felt and still feel the most comfortable.
Okay. So you became country.
I'm a little country now. It's funny because most people think I am from the South instead of being from D.C., which is hilarious to me. Because once I go, all I have to do is go back down there for like a day, and the accent and everything comes back. So I'm very country, as you would say now.
So then what brought you back to D.C. after you finished college?
Well,
or what happened after?
Well, I didn't come immediately back. I kind of was gone for about 11 years before I came back. I ended up working for Nike out in Oregon. So I lived in Oregon. And then I went to Beaverton.
Okay.
I worked in Nike World headquarters.
Okay.
So I was out there, and then I ended up going to graduate school in Atlanta. So I moved to Atlanta, got my master's in sports marketing, was working in the sports business until my mom got hit by a cab up here. Taxi cab ran the light and broke her back. So I had to come home, I came home for like 2 years to help with her rehab, and then I left when she was okay, and then she had like another issue come up, and I just said, I'm her only child. She's not remarried. I'm gonna eventually have to come back home anyway. So I just made the decision about 04 to come back and just stay.
Okay, so since 04, 05, that's when you came back. So, a couple new places on the map, Oregon and Atlanta. And this time you still haven't started gardening though, right?
No, I actually did not start gardening till 2 years ago.
Okay. Was it, up to that point, was it something you were even thinking about still? Your connection with food was still what you're...
Oh yeah, I mean, during that time when I came back, one of the jobs I had, I was director of catering for the National Geographic Society. So, and I had never worked in catering before, but because of my food knowledge and my palate and what I do for a living, I'm an event producer. My specialty is operations and logistics, which is kind of how I got the job. I actually didn't even apply for the job at Nat Geo. I applied to work at the World Bank, but they looked at my background and was like, I think Nat Geo really could use you right now, and that's how I got the job. And so being there, you're dealing with National Geographic, you're dealing again with people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And being able, working with the embassies and being able to produce events that are reflective of their culture, it was I loved the experience.
Yeah.
So because of my food knowledge and my awareness, it was I was able to progress and really be successful. And I remember the Malaysian embassy came. We're doing an event, and I was working with the people from the embassy, and they were one of my favorite foods in the world is roti canai, which is like a roti pancake, not like the Caribbean roti, but this is more flaky, has a little bit more buttery, almost like a flake, like almost like a croissant crepe is the with a curry dipping sauce that goes along the side, and it's generally like potato or carrot in it. And so when I was working with them about the menu, and I was like, oh, well, are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? And they're looking at me like, how does she know about our food? And so I must have left an impression on them, because they called me back later and said, well, the ambassador would like to come over and meet with you today. And I'm like, oh, well, today's not good. We have an event I'm setting up for, so this afternoon I'm going to be completely thrown into this. And they were like, oh, okay, And so later on the afternoon, I'm setting up an event for someone else. We're in it. And I noticed like this whole contingent of people come in. And I'm like, what are these people? Then I look and I noticed it's one of the people I recognized from dealing with the Malaysian event. And so they walked over. He's like, we told the ambassador about you, and he really couldn't wait to meet you. So he just came over. And so they brought me over, introduced me to him. He was like, I wish you could vote in my country for me. And he was just like, I was just like, I love Malaysian culture. And I have this, I was telling him about, because he was asking me how I knew. And I was like, well, I have this world food tour that I'm going to take one day. And Malaysia is on one of the spots. And so when I told him where else I wanted to go, he was like, oh, you could just come to Malaysia and not go to all the other places, because we have all that in our country. And so, because it's like Japan, China, India, Hong Kong, Singapore, the Philippines, and Thailand.
Yeah.
That's my world food tour that I will go on. And so he was just like, whenever you want to come to Malaysia, you just contact my office. So...
Is he still the ambassador?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But one of my friends is a federal agent for NCIS and just got relocated to Japan. So
there you go.
I will be going to Japan very, very, very soon.
That's great.
So
have you done any food world traveling?
No, well, I go to Hawaii every year.
Okay.
Because one, it's the one place where I can completely relax and no one will bother me. But two, I took Japanese in college, and so all Hawaii is really Japanese. So it's like one of the few times I can really go over there and try to use some of the language I remember. And just the food, like I love Asian culture. Like if I ever thought that you could change cultures, like, you know, if you had the ability, I love Asian culture. And so for me, it's I'm in my element. Like my mother all the time is like, do we have to eat Asian food like every day? Yes, we're in Hawaii. This is the closest until I get on my world tour that I'll get to the source. Like ramen over there is not ramen anywhere else. You know, just the complexity and the depth of the broths and that's you. It's just, and it's so simple. You know, it's just so good, and I just love the food over there. You can't have bad food in Hawaii. It's just impossible because you have the freshness of fish and seafood and everything else. But it is delicious. It is delicious.
So and working at National Geographic, that job had started when you came back in 04?
I actually started there. Before then, I actually worked for the Sofitel. Which is the French brand of Accor. Well, the Sofitel is owned by Accor, which is a French company. They own about 4,000 hotels worldwide, and Sofitel is the luxury brand. And there's only 10 in North America. So the one here is right by the White House, right on 15th and H. And so there I worked in conference services, but I was one of only 4 Americans that worked for the hotel. And so working as the conference services manager, I'm selling groups, you know, servicing groups, so we have to do a lot of menu. And this one thing about the Sofitel, almost all their chefs are French. So, like, they bring them over to work. And I don't know if you've ever spent time in a French kitchen.
No.
I know
it's a whole other world.
It is a whole other, I can say all the stereotypes I've ever seen in my experience are true in a French kitchen. And our menus were very French. And we would have to change a lot because veal, it was heavy on veal. And I would have to say to the chefs, you know, a lot of Americans are not big on veal. I think it's delicious. But a lot of people have an issue because it's a baby animal. But then we eat chicken wings, so I can't understand, you know, why people are focused on that. But so we would always have to change it. And you'd be like, Chekesha, you're Americans. You don't have taste. You want to change this. You want to change that. You know, they weren't big on a lot of changes. But the pastry chef and I became very good friends. And so I was always the American taster. I was always the test subject. And so, needless to say, like the year and a half I was there, I gained like 35 pounds because when you're running around in the events environment, I mean, you're literally running. It's not like you have time to sit and eat. And if you've ever had a real French croissant, okay, so imagine those are just around all the time. And you're running around and you're just grabbing whatever you can get on the go. You're eating like 5 or 6 of them in a day. And you know they use real butter. They use a different kind of sugar than we use over here. It's like the butter is like a triple fat butter, and then the sugar is like a super sugar that they use, but it's not super sweet. But it was just, and the sauces and the cream sauces, it was incredible working there. So I left there and actually went to the Reagan building, which had another French chef, and they make all of their food from scratch there. All the service is done a la minute, so there's no pre-plating, no anything back there. And then I ended up at Nat Geo.
So in all this journey from being a young person to these jobs that are exposing you to all this delicious food and food preparation, are you becoming curious about like where ingredients come from? And
well, that's kind of that started to pique my interest in around age 31, 32. I started to get sick all of a sudden. And it got progressively worse where like my stomach became distended like you would see like in the famine countries, you know, and I had problems with digestion, not being able to relieve myself. And so I started to go to the doctor, and because I got to the point where I started to phase things out of my diet. Like maybe it was something I was eating. And it got to the point I couldn't phase anything else out. So I went to the doctor, and then they thought I had colon cancer. So I went through a series where, we were dealing with that. Then it wasn't colon cancer. Then they thought it was stomach cancer. So then we went through some stuff like that. And then I met someone very randomly, and I was just talking about being frustrated with, because I grew up never being sick. So this was like, I never had chickenpox, no colds, like no childhood sicknesses.
Yeah.
So for me, I didn't even grow up taking medicine. So even now, I am not a person that just takes medicine for really anything. So for me, being sick and having these issues is completely new. And I was frustrated. And the person said, well, maybe you have food allergies. And I was like, I'm not allergic to anything. I'm 30-some years old. I'm not allergic to anything. And after going through another bout of them trying to figure out what it was, now maybe it's Crohn's disease. Maybe it's irritable bowel, I went and got myself tested for food allergies, and that's exactly what it was. I developed an allergy to corn, wheat, yeast, and milk, which is in everything. And I started to do some thinking, like, how did I get this? And I realized, up until I went to college, I never had processed food. From college to that point, I had been eating everything in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's when I really realized it was what I was eating was making me sick. So it was very hard because you start to break down wheat alone, pizza, cake, sandwiches, anything bread, pasta, dead. You can't have any of that.
Yep.
Then how could I give up my Ben and Jerry's milk? Like, how could I do that? I didn't, and I found that the allergy, I couldn't drink anymore. Drink alcohol.
Yeah.
And working in the event business is stressful. And sometimes you like to have a cocktail at the end of the day. I couldn't drink anymore. Like, I could take a sip of an amaretto sour and be almost passed out like I've drunk a whole bottle of tequila. So it caused me to really have to assess what is important. And it took me a while to get to the point of acceptance with it. Like the alcohol, after a few tries of trying to do that, it was just pointless. So that was easy to walk away from. But a sandwich and like pizza and pasta and ice cream were like the most difficult things. And so when I got to Nat Geo, 6 months after we got there, they decided to change their whole mission when it came to food, because they felt like they were not following what their mission statement was. So we had to go into develop a fully sustainable food process. So all of the sourcing of the food, even the plasticware that was in the employee cafeteria, like we had to change everything to be sustainable. So through that process of looking at the Blue Ocean Institute, looking for seafood, looking at the local farms, looking at, finding takeout containers that were biodegradable and whatnot. It really was it was like a year and a half going through that, and I just started to become more aware. And then I had bought my house over in Anacostia during this time there, and so as I'm starting to work in my house, I'm like, I'm going to get zero VOC paints, and I'm going to start to recycle and upcycle and reuse. So I just kind of started that. So that's kind of how I started, my mindset started to change. And then actually, how I got into just even yard work was because at the time I was dating this guy, and I had gone out of town or something, and I had asked him to cut the grass while I was out of town, and he didn't. And I came back and my grass was like 2 feet high. And I kept asking, and he didn't do it. And one day I just got mad, and I just dug up the whole thing. Like I dug up the whole yard, pulled up everything, and
was that new to you? To just
completely new.
Yard work?
Completely. I watch HGTV and DIY Network, but I had never done it, and I just got up mad. You know how we women get sometimes when we get anger as a motivation, and so I just dug up everything, cleared everything out, bought sod, put the sod down, planted some bushes and whatnot. And literally and that was like Labor Day weekend 2010. And so my neighbors were like, oh my God, like you now have the best yard on the block. And all I could look at it was be angry at it, because it reminded me of an angry moment. So the next year, 2011, because again, I don't have a huge yard, but for mowing purposes, like it was only 17 pieces of sod they covered, so it wasn't huge. It became more of a hassle trying to mow that thing. And so the next year I said, you know what, I'm gonna try planting my own food, and just paying attention more and more what was going on in the world with food and Monsanto. And by this time I had seen we had premiered Forks Over Knives in that Geo, so that kind of planted a seed. And then I started watching some of the other movies, Vegetate and Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, and some of the other documentaries that were out. And I was just like, I never was sick when I was a vegetarian. And so 2011, I decided to go back being vegetarian. And then within 6 months, I had lost like 60 pounds. Just dropped off. Not even exercise, just literally changing diet back to a vegetarian diet. No milk, and nothing I was allergic to. So really staying on purpose. And
did you become a vegan? Were you eating?
No, I like butter. No.
So you can do butter. You can't do milk, but you can do.
Right. Well, I really needed to like not do anything, but butter is a hard thing. How do you? In my mind, a lot of the vegan products are so processed that I might as well eat the real thing rather than do the processed thing.
Right.
So that's how I rationalize it in my mind, because of all the chemicals to make something be not what it's supposed to be. I might as well just be a little bit more natural and do that. So but then right after that, I got a new opportunity with a client to start traveling, and for the last year, I've been gone 2 to 3 weeks out of each month on the road. And so I gained 30 pounds back because, when I'm home, I'm fine. But being gone that much and always working, this is not, not vacation time, in that it's very, very difficult to stay on purpose.
So I want to hear more about actually starting the garden, but how long have you lived in Anacostia?
I bought my house 4 years ago, August.
What brought you to Anacostia?
My mother, actually, I had a house out of state. I had a house in Atlanta, and I sold it. And my mom, I had been renting some apartments, and my mom was like, well, you really need to look at trying to get a house. And I was like, oh, well, no, I just want to get a condo. And she's like, I already own condos. Like, you're going to get these, these eventually will be yours. You don't need another apartment. You need to buy a house. And so originally I was kind of looking in Maryland, which I don't know why, because I'm a DC girl, true and true. But my mom was like, you need to look over in Anacostia. And I kind of frowned up and looked at her. I was like, what do you mean? I'm your only child. Why would you want me to live over there? Because when I last really lived in DC, in the late 80s and early 90s, that's when DC was the murder capital. You did not go over there if you did not have any business over there. So I had never been there. And so my only experience is what I saw on the news of what happened over in that part of Southeast. So she was like, no, you really need to look. There's a lot that's about to happen over there. You really need to look and pay attention. And so I looked over in Northeast, a couple different places. And so finally I said, you know what, let me check it out. And I went, of course, in the middle of the day, because I wasn't sure about the area. And I just started driving around, and ended up on this side street, and it was a little sketchy at the bottom. It's kind of like on a slalom ski slope. It almost seems like a 45% incline almost. It's a steep hill. And so as I started to progress up, I noticed it kind of changed. And you could kind of see the houses kind of change, where you could tell people were like taking care of their houses. And I ended up at the top of the hill, and there were like people outside, and they were talking to each other. You could tell they were neighbors. And I was like, this is strange. I've never seen this. Because as long as my mother has lived where she's lived, I know maybe 2 people out of the entire complex of 4 high-rise apartment buildings and 100 townhouses. People just keep to themselves there. So I got out. I had a friend with me and got out and just started talking to people. And I was like, it reminds me of the suburbs. Like, it was really like the suburbs. And so they started telling me about the neighborhood. They were asking me questions about myself. And then they finally said, well, this house right here, it's not on the market, but it's foreclosed, but it'll be coming on the market in 30 days. If you go ahead and, walk around the property, it's okay. And what I didn't know at the time is that one of the people I was talking to was the ANC commissioner for the neighborhood, who had been commissioner for like 6 years at that point. So I looked around in the house. I could look in the windows. The house looked, in good condition. And so I kind of started watching it and because the business I'm in, my hours are very, very irregular. I can come in very late at night sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that's important because I was going to be living by myself. So, I would drive around late at night and early in the morning, midday night, and there never was anything going on. And so one day I happened to check the MLS, and it happened to be the day it got listed, put in an offer on it, and got the place.
Cool.
So that's how I ended up over there. And now, look at what's going on that side of the city. It's starting to, while not as fast as we would like, but there is change. And, they don't build all these new bridge spans to give access to an area that nothing's going to go on,
Yeah.
So that's what I tell people whenever they say, you live in Anacostia? Yeah, but you notice those new bridges over there? Why would bridges are $1 billion projects? They're not going to give access to an area that they don't have plans for.
And how do you feel about that? I mean, DC is gentrifying rapidly.
This is the thing. I mean, I look at it where in the 80s, a lot of people were trying to escape the city. And I think people were thinking short term and not long term.
Yeah.
A lot of people that were living in the city wanted the big homes in the suburbs and land and whatnot. So they sold their homes that had been in families for years for cheap prices. And now through traffic and everything else, now they want to come back. And for some of the areas, especially Anacostia, it originally was an all-white area historically, and then it became African American. And I just look at where, if it's been in the hands of one place or one group of people and this could go for any group. Mm-hmm. If something has been in the hands for decades and it's not been kept up, how can you be upset at people who want to come in and make it better? Mm-hmm. So I don't mind who comes in, in terms of homeowners. My neighbor told me just this past weekend she opened up a door and saw like a walking tour of about 20 to 30 white people just walking around our street, which you would never see that historically. And so it's like, people are starting to realize logistically it is fantastic as a location you can be downtown in 10 minutes. Yeah. Or just as you're starting to get in traffic, you're off the bridge and you're home.
Yeah.
It really legit, and we have a waterfront. We can see from the top of our hill over to the airport, the monument.
Yeah.
And some of the houses have unobstructed views of the entire city.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's 1 block from the Frederick Douglass home where I live, which obviously has one of the best views in the city. I mean, it's just an incredible place to be.
Yeah. And
right now, there have been houses that have been boarded up for years. Right now, all 5 of those boarded up houses on my block are under construction right now. Mm-hmm. At the top of the hill, there was an abandoned apartment complex. They had been there for like 10 years. They came in September and leveled the whole thing down. So, we're seeing activity in our area that's, hey, raise my property value up. I got my house for under $200,000.
Yeah.
So, it was already undervalued when I got it.
Yeah.
So just come on, please come raise my property value.
Yeah.
So.
And what about, you just mentioned kind of the community feeling that you connected with when you first went there, which was different from what you had experienced in other parts of the city. Mm-hmm. What other interactions have you had with some people who lived there for a long time? Well,
we have a phenomenal neighborhood. Like, we hang out at each other's house.
Does your neighborhood have a particular name?
We're in the historic Anacostia.
Okay.
So we are truly in historic Anacostia. Yeah. So, and which is a very small block of Southeast, but unfortunately on the news, if anything happens in Southeast, they just call it all Anacostia, which is not the case. Yeah, it's a small, when you look at a map, it is a very small section within Southeast. So, one of my neighbors is a vegan chef. So
a professional.
She is a chef. Well, she's a school teacher, but also is a vegan chef. She teaches people the vegetarian. She's been in the Post several times writing. Her name is Levita Mondi. And so, like, she forages in my garden all the time, you know, especially when I'm out of town, because I'm like, don't let it go to waste.
Yeah.
You know, please use whatever's there. But, like, I was just at the movies with our ANC commissioner last night, you know, because she lives directly in front of me. So, I mean, we spent time at each other's houses. We watch each other's homes. Yeah. We're all out there helping each other in each other's yards. I mean, we really have a tight-knit community on my block.
So you made this decision to start gardening. Have you met other gardeners in Anacostia?
No. Well, yes, actually that's not true. I do know someone else that does garden who has a much bigger house than mine, with a bigger footprint. His name is Jeff, and he's down the street. Because I kind of saw him and what he was doing, which said to me, hey, I can do it. If he, you know, had success over here, he can do it. And then we had a guy who was beekeeping over there, but unfortunately I saw him recently. He said the bees died, so I think next year he may try to start it up again.
Was he a long-time beekeeper?
No, he had just taken a class that was offered by the city.
Wow.
And he tried it his first or second year. He got like 10 pounds of honey. You know, so you know, the honeybees, the plight of the honeybees is so serious right now because people aren't paying attention. It's going to affect everything, which is why one of the reasons they're going into this whole, you know, GMO food thing. And it's really one big circle. You know, they're, you know, from our food to the animals and the environment to healthcare, it's all one big circle. Yeah. You know, they're feeding the animals genetically modified grain and everything else, which goes into, we're eating genetically modified, you know, fruits and vegetables, or even perhaps cloned meat in some instances, which then what causes problems. And you've never seen historically people have issues with wheat. You know, in every culture, thousands of years, you've had wheat as a product. So now all of a sudden wheat is a problem because when we were having the droughts in the 80s and whole, you know, farms were being wiped out because of the drought, they had to do something to make a drought-resistant crop. So they genetically modified the wheat. So now we have health issues. And so what happens, you start to get high blood pressure, diabetes, and all this other stuff. Then they get us on the medicine, and they want you on prescription meds. And so that's not healing you, that's maintaining your illness. So it's just to me, it's just one big circle of, you know, where you're just kind of spinning your wheels. And if you don't really start to investigate what you're doing and what you're taking in, you're going to just stay in that cycle.
So for your garden, what resources have you used? I mean, you were in your garden, how'd you...
I honestly just, you know, was like, let's just try a bunch of different things. I started off with a lot of herbs. I like perennials because this is the thing. I was traveling, so I wanted a lot of things that I didn't have to really do a lot with. And I'm actually very blessed because I haven't spent a crazy amount of time in my garden. It literally thrives by itself. But what I did, you know, after looking online, I started by putting down compost all first, and then soil conditioners, and then putting like the dirt that you use for vegetable growing and whatnot, and then I top it all off with compost again.
Where'd you get your compost?
Just Home Depot.
The store.
Just Home Depot, nothing special, you know. I tried to do compost kit, but because I'm not home a lot and it's only me, you know, I don't have a lot to give back. So
did you subscribe to the compost kit?
I did, but because I wasn't home, like literally when I took my bucket, it had been there 6 months. And so I feel bad for whoever had to open that to see the science project that developed in that thing. But I just really just looked and see, and you know, I knew that I wanted to grow heirloom plants because again, that goes into the whole I didn't want to do any hybrid anything. I didn't want to do anything that was genetically modified. I wanted to have all natural type products. So that's really what I have in my yard is all heirloom, non-GMO or hybrid crops.
What veggies?
Well, right now, right now, this year, again, I was traveling so much, so part of the seedlings that I started, they grew, but they didn't develop well. My zucchini and my squash and my eggplant didn't do well this year, but the year before they did. I did it, and I moved stuff around, so I didn't do it in the same place, especially tomatoes, because I read that you shouldn't grow tomatoes in the same place. But I had planted those. Right now, I have okra. I have 2 different types of heirloom tomatoes. Always got to grow mortgage busters, just because I love the story of those. I have Swiss chard, beets, carrots, collard greens, kale, Chinese cabbage, regular cabbage, red cabbage, garlic, onions, broccoli, jalapeno peppers, 3 different kinds, orange, red, and purple peppers. And that's just the food. That doesn't count the cooking herbs.
Yeah.
So I have 5 different kinds of mint.
Yeah.
2 different rosemary bushes, basil, chives, lemon balm, silver thyme, lemon thyme, peppermint, spearmint, curry, lavender. My sage, it got too wet, so it didn't do well. I grew lemon cucumbers, peas, snow peas. What else do I have in there? It's like 35 different things that's in there right now.
So how big is your patch? I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
It's all compact,
yeah.
It's all just compact together in
and
there.
Have you, because that can be challenging to do that kind of compact gardening. Have you,
and sweet potatoes.
And sweet potatoes.
And sweet potatoes.
Down below. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, I can show you a picture. It's honestly very neat. Mm-hmm. Except the vine.
Yeah.
Sweet potatoes, they vine like crazy.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, I've had to train them and curve them around to not overtake the whole sidewalk.
Yeah.
But no, it's very, very compact. I have put some raised beds out there. And right now I'm planning for next year how I'm going to move things around. Because now that the mints and the vines, they're popping up in other places. So I'm actually going to relocate them to my side yard along the side of my house. Okay. So it's kind of like a path through there. Because, and my tarragon is crazy. The tarragon looks like the burning bush. I mean, it's just huge.
Yeah.
And my yard gets full sun.
Yeah.
So I really don't have to do much out there. I just go out there and prune, really. And carrots and dill, I had that too.
Yeah. And do you have a backyard too?
Yes, but it was fully shaded.
Okay.
But a tree fell down from my neighbor's yard this summer, and now my backyard that was once fully shaded is now full sun. So I'm like, ooh, now I could really do some things back there. I have a huge backyard for where I live.
Yeah. So what do you do with all that stuff?
How
much time you get?
Can we pause just so I can call? Because I'm just gonna
we'll wrap up soon.
Oh no, it's fine.
So it sounds like your foray into gardening has been pretty successful, which is exciting.
Yes, people often come by my house or they'll see me out there and stop and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about, gardening. And I'm like, well, I'm not an expert at it, but this is what I've learned, trial and error. What I've learned, I've bought, the books like The Front Yard Farmer and I Grow Food, Not Lawns, movement. And I just think it's cool. Like last Thanksgiving, I was able to go out my yard and get every herb for my turkey and cook everything. And it's a much different flavor. And then I started making my own extracts because I realized that it really is just alcohol and whatever the thing is. Yeah. And so I started doing that last year, and then I made jams for the first time last year, and everybody's like, when are you making strawberry jam again? Because they were hoping I would do it this summer, but I was gone too much. So right now I'm canning because my jalapeno peppers have been growing like crazy, so I've been canning jalapeno peppers. And I have
Like pickling them, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, nice. And so, I mean, how people stopping by, I mean, where you're at in Anacostia, I mean, do people see it as like a strange thing to do, or?
No, a lot of people think it's cool. I've heard rumors that one of my neighbors thinks it encourages raccoons, but we had raccoons well before I ever started gardening, and I've never opened my door to see a raccoon in the yard. So I don't know about that. I do know that the cats seem to like my sage. So certain things I won't plant in the ground. I'll have to put it planters up because like I was growing some globe box basil and sage nearby, and something was eating it, and I noticed one morning I saw some cats.
Yeah.
So it must have been like catnip to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just know that I'll have to plant those maybe from baskets and other things. They're not right in the ground for them to eat it.
Yeah. All right, so people haven't sometimes.
I have one person
Yeah.
and they didn't say it to me. I heard from someone else that they were saying something about raccoons, but
Right.
the raccoons were living in the empty houses that had been boarded up.
Yeah.
And we would see them during the day.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, my yard didn't create raccoons coming out of nowhere.
Yeah. And sometimes people think vegetable gardens don't look as pretty as the manicured.
Mine is pretty neat because, like I said, with the sweet potatoes, I really took care to train them to grow in a certain direction. I like the way that it looks. I mean, I don't want a messy yard. I really take pride in the house that I have. So that's why I want to kind of move certain plants back because the tarragon is so big and it's like on the corner. And it's like so big that it's falling over and it's just growing out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move that maybe to the backyard or the side yard, but definitely the mints and the pepper because they pop up. Like I have a rogue basil plant in my side yard and I'm like, how did it get here? But then I remember on my retaining wall, I had the seedling packs sitting there with the cover so that the sun could warm them up. So maybe one of the seeds fell out.
Yeah.
And this rogue, basil plant is now growing in the middle of construction debris on the side. So,
where do you get your seeds and seedlings?
Well, I have not gone online and ordered any. I've actually got them from Lowe's or Home Depot from the brands that Seeds of Change, I think, is one of them. I think those come from Lowe's, and they're non-GMO. And pretty much heirloom.
They have like the heirloom varieties, like a mortgage lifter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then in doing this, and you're clearly thinking about the big picture of.
I even asked my neighbors, like, what do you guys want me to grow this fall?
Uh-huh.
Some people, I want turnip greens, I want kale. So, my neighbor the other day wanted to make some jalapeno cornbread, so she called me. She's like, I just called and wanted to know, can I get some jalapenos?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, go take it. Mm-hmm. I mean, some stuff I grow I don't even eat. That I don't personally like, and I'm just growing it just for the sake to grow it.
Yeah. Are there any other occurrences that stand out of making those kinds of connections around the food that you've grown?
Yeah, it's funny because while I was on travel, my neighbor was, she takes pictures of what she eats, and she's like, yes, tonight I made fried green tomatoes, and she has this picture, and I was like, are those out of my yard? And then she started selling this basil lemonade that she makes, and the basil was like from my yard. From my yard. So I'm helping other people become entrepreneurs with the things that are being produced in the yard. Nice. So I just think it's cool to be able to go out, like I'm about to dig up the sweet potatoes in another week or so because I never grew them before.
Yeah.
And so I'm growing Beauregards. So I was like, okay, how do I prep? Because I got to cut all this vine back. Like, how do I do it? And how do I, are there any seeds? Like what's the process? And so I was reading that you have to kind of cure the sweet potatoes. You can eat them out the ground, but they're not the best doing that. So I was reading, that you really need to cure them for about a month. So I'm going to dig them up in another week or so. That way, right at Thanksgiving time, I'll be able to have these, sweet potatoes and make yam, candy yams and sweet potato pie and stuff from
Yeah.
and I just think that's the coolest thing. My goal really is to have an urban homestead. Like if we could have chickens in DC, because I do like eggs.
Yeah.
I would have chickens in the back,
Yeah.
if I could. I know it would probably bother one of my neighbors, but, I really have this firm belief of cutting out the middleman and doing what you can on your own property.
Yeah. Are you connecting with other people who are trying to do that as well?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's another neighbor, another neighbor that gardens, and I tell people, there's a couple people I know who've had, through economy or other things, they're having some issues. I'm like, well, if you want some vegetables, just come get them out my yard, feel free. And I just like the feeling of connecting to the earth. Like I'm happy when I'm out there. It's like when I'm out there, even just picking the weeds or the dead leaves off, it calms me down because I work in a very high pace, high stress environment. So being out there really kind of like settles me down. And like the other day I was out there, probably a couple of weeks now, and I was watering. And that's the thing, I don't even remember to water sometimes on a regular basis, but this garden just thrives on its own. And I looked, and it was a butterfly emerging from its cocoon on the back of one of my chard leaves. So I just kind of sat there and watched it and zoomed in and watched it while I was just drying its wings off.
Wow.
And it came out in the colors of my undergraduate school colors. So I was like, this is meant, like this garden is meant for me to be doing this. And I really I can see the full vision of my garden in its completed form. Like I want to have, I was able to rescue some gutters that I'm going to attach to the fence and do like some lettuces and spinach up there and maybe run that along the side of my house. I built some brick planters in the backyard that I'll probably, because the basil grew this tall into a real bush.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I have all, so last weekend I was retrieving seeds.
Yeah.
So I was retrieving seeds, drying them up, put them, labeling envelopes, as to what they are, so that I can have those seeds to plant with next year. So I'm really excited to execute the vision that's in my head of what my house could be.
Nice.
And then we have so many open plots in the neighborhood, vacant land. Some of people were talking to me about like, I don't know if you've seen that TED speech where the guy in South Central does guerrilla gardening.
Oh, okay.
If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's a guy, I can't remember his name, but if you Google TED, California guerrilla gardening, you'll see it. And this guy talks about how he just, any open land in South Central, they just renegade, plant a garden in it. And the city were trying to fight them from it. And it's like, how are you fighting vegetables?
Yeah.
Like, who are vegetables bothering? So we were thinking about trying to do that on some of the vacant lots, but everything now is being bought up so quickly. I don't know if we could really do it, but for the time being, anybody that wants to toil in I consider my yard like a community garden because I don't have a fence in the front, so everything is planted in the front. You could just walk up and grab.
Nice. But it doesn't sound like you've connected with any any of the nonprofits or groups that are doing.
No, I have not. I know over in Fort Stanton that they have a community garden where you can get your own plot.
Yeah.
Over there, but that's the closest.
Yeah.
I've called and asked questions about it because that's originally what I was going to try to do, but they had like a wait list.
Yeah.
So I was just like, well, I might as well just dig up this grass that I just put down the year before and do it myself.
Yeah. And did you just learn how to cook throughout your life?
Just throughout my life.
Yeah.
I've never, I did at one point want to go to cooking school, but I don't even like to use recipes. Like I literally cook from taste.
Yeah.
And I am a phenomenal cook. Like that I don't like to cook for me, but if you come to my house, I'm making everything from scratch. And just, I from my experience of eating out, traveling, being around different cultures, I have really I have one huge cabinet that's just spice. in my house. Like I'll go to the Ethiopian market and buy my Burberry spice from down there. Like I'll go here and get the spice. So I really love flavors, different flavors, and like I said, I love curry. It's one of the things I make all the time. I'm now starting to do a little bit of raw cooking. But that's still kind of new for me. But I love food. I think, but I'm learning to not live to eat, but to eat to live. So learning that balance.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, before, in the weight that I gained, eating all this food I had never had before, I was like, oh man, eating well beyond the point of being full, eating just because it was there, but it was good and it's delicious, portion size and moderation. I don't believe in diets, but I believe you can have anything within moderation. So, just making different choices, and again, cutting, like there's this one thing I found a couple years ago, this thing, have you ever had duck bacon? It is like bacon times 1,000.
But it's from duck meat.
It's from duck. They sell it at Safeway. It's like $12 maybe a pack. And you only need 2 pieces. It's so rich. It is incredible. And I was introduced to it by someone. And like I'm a person, once I like something, I like it. So for like a good month, I was eating this like every day, duck bacon. And then, anything you cook in duck fat just tastes 1,000 times better. So I was saving the duck fat and then cooking my eggs in the duck fat. So then I went to the doctor and they're like, your cholesterol is a bit high. What have you been doing lately? And I was like,
eating duck fat.
I've been eating duck bacon and cooking my eggs in duck fat. And they're looking at me like, really, Chekesha? Because a few years before, when we had the blizzard, right before the Snowmageddon, Harris Teeter had a sale on crab legs, like Alaskan king crab legs. And so I was going to have a get together at my house for, I think, Super Bowl. So I had bought like $200 worth of these crab legs and put them in the freezer because I was like, okay, just getting stuff for a party. Let me get it while it's on sale. Well, then Snowmageddon happened. And then we were stuck in the house. Because, again, I live at the top of a hill. The snow trucks couldn't get up.
Wow.
So all I had in the house to eat was these snow crab legs and butter. So for like 2 whole weeks, I ate these king crab legs and drawn butter. And so right after, like maybe 2 weeks after that, I had another doctor's appointment. And they're like, your cholesterol's a little off. And I'm like, well, you see, I was eating these crab legs for like 2 weeks. So they know whenever something's elevated with me, it's something. I've eaten something. Because when I like it, I like it and I go full-fledged. But I've not done that in about a year or so.
Right. And that's when you say that you're working on eating to live, making different choices, is that kind of thing? Yeah. So they're knocking on the door.
Oh, okay.
But you're thinking a lot about problems in food systems and health, individual health. Here in Washington D.C. or in Anacostia, what else do you see happening? What else are you thinking about?
Well, I really want to open up a different food alternative over there because right now, we mostly have carryouts, Chinese carryouts, and there's really not a lot of healthy food choices over where we are, and I really want to change the landscape. I really think once I sit and talk to people about, food and everything, they're like, wow, you really should start educating people about this because a lot of people don't know. And, the quality of the food, even in the grocery store, like the Safeway that's closest to me, I never shop there because the food quality is not great. The way the vegetables look, the way the fruit looks, it just doesn't look great. And I now start, when I don't grow or if I have something I want something that's not in my yard, I'm at farmers markets now.
Which ones?
I go to DuPont Circle on Sundays. There's now like a little flea market down in Anacostia that's running through October, and there's a farmer that comes and brings stuff. On or I'm up in Union Market, getting stuff. So I just think although it's more expensive, I don't have to pay for prescriptions. I'm not on prescriptions made. That's how I look at it. I can pay you for cheap food, but then end up on medicines, or I could just pay more for my food and not be sick.
Interesting.
So it's really a trade-off. It's which way do you prefer to spend your money? I rarely ever am sick, and it's all about just choice. And when you really look at our food, we have a dinner at my mom's house every first of the year, and someone came in late, and it's like a potluck, and someone came in late and brought one of those vegetable trays in, and so she didn't want, she doesn't want a bunch of food left over at her house because it's just her, so she's encouraging people to take plates, so I'm like, oh, I'll take the vegetable tray, I'll eat it. And so I took it home, ate like the carrots and the celery out of it first, and then I went out of town for 3 weeks, and it was still in my refrigerator, so I was just like, man, I gotta clean my fridge when I get back, because I know that food's gonna be all rotten and spoiled. When I got back 3 weeks later, not one thing even had a brown spot on it. There was no mold that had formed, no anything, and I was just like, this is why I'm growing my own food right now, because it's supposed to die. Yeah. Food is not supposed to last for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. It's supposed to die.
Right. Yeah. Did that take getting used to because gardening food and fresh food, it does die. Like, you got to keep up with it or it's gone. So
when I've missed, because like last week I was in Las Vegas all last week, so I had some tomatoes drop off while I was gone that nobody got. So now I'm just drying them out for the seeds.
Yeah.
Just to replant.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really go to waste.
Yeah.
It's just repurposing it.
Yeah. And even if it just rots into the earth.
Right, compost.
Compost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Is there anything else we missed from your journey that you want to
Well, I just think, again, my journey to gardening came from being mad at an ex-boyfriend. So I think you never know how things turn out. I really couldn't imagine not doing it now. Because again, I'm cooking, I just go right outside, grab whatever it is I need, and I'm looking at how I can even make it bigger. And I think more people could do it. It's not as hard, getting the land ready first is about the hardest thing.
Yeah.
After that, you're just sitting back and watering it and watching it grow.
Yeah.
That's really it. And I think, I don't have the biggest yard in DC. I have a nice size front yard. And right now, everything I grow is in my front yard. And, I think that, start off with a little small 4x4 if you can. See how that goes for you. And then I think after you start to use some of your product, most people may want to try to expand it some more. Even if you do it from a pot, even if it's just cooking herbs, those are the simplest ones to grow because they come back for the most part every year. You just plant them and go.
Yeah. And
you can leave them out in the wintertime. Like I don't do any really winter preparation except for when it's cold, wrapping my tomatoes up, to make sure that they don't freeze. But it really is not as difficult as people think it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much again for sitting and talking.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.